appreciate you making some special arrangements to meet me today. I'm looking forward to meeting you. This is a nice sized group, so I'm hoping we can have a conversation today. I'm going to start off by just letting you know a little bit about me and who I am, because one of the things I believe is that if you want to know where somebody is going, you need to know where they came from. And I think that those experiences, those formative experiences are really important. And I think it's important for you to know a little bit about me and my character so that when you hear the attack ads, you can know the truth. When I'm in the governor's office and we've got a tough decision before us, you'll have some idea of what my constitution is as we make some of those tough decisions. I'll let you know what I think is the issues that are facing Arizona, that are coming up over and over again. And then last, and the one that I don't ever want to leave talking about, is winning. Because more than anything else as Democrats, we need to win. And the very good news that I have for you is we are winning. And I'm very excited about that. So let me start off by just introducing myself. My name is David Garcia, and I am running to be governor of my home state. I was born and raised here in Arizona. In fact, as far back as we know, we're from a fourth-generation Arizonan. And I say as far back as we know because the best records we have are my great-grandfather had family that lived in the Salt River Pima Reservation north of Mesa. And he crossed over Lehigh, which I don't think it exists anymore. I think it's been incorporated, and owned land in North Mesa, which is where part of my family is from. And the other half of my family is from the Mesa-Gilbert area. And I am the fourth generation to call Arizona home. I am from Mesa, born and raised, and my dad was a commercial painter. He painted buildings and construction for his entire career. And one of the things that he spent a lot of time doing is showing me the places across Arizona, particularly in Phoenix, that he painted. And so now, today, my dad passed away a couple years ago, and there's a new building painted in downtown Phoenix. In some ways, it takes a little of my history, because I see my dad's work being painted over. At a young age, he got me up before the crack of dawn to go to work with him in high school, basically most of the summer. And I used to lay there. And he'd get up at 4, we were out of the house at 4:30 or so, and I'd lay there and think that maybe today my dad doesn't need me. And that didn't happen very often, if at all. Came and woke me up and got me to go to work with him, which actually I enjoyed. I got a little time to spend with my dad, and he always bought me a really good lunch, so it was a good deal. I am a product of Arizona's public schools. I went to the Mesa Public School District, kindergarten through high school. I don't know if we have any former educators here. Do we have any former educators? A few, thank you. I was that student that you needed to convince that what you were teaching them was relevant before they really gave you all their effort. And not that I wasn't a smart kid or a talented kid, but as a first-generation college student, I didn't know how big the world was. My world was pretty small, and I had to get out of that world a little bit to get an understanding of what was going on and around in my neighborhood and my world. So I joined the military when I was 17. My dad had to sign for me to enter the military because I wasn't old enough to sign for myself. And he signed the papers. I still remember that day, and I still remember it was a proud day. He had served in the Army Vietnam era. My uncle had served in Vietnam, and there was a lot of pride in me joining that lineage. But the truth is, I needed the military to grow up a lot. And it did that for me. I tell folks that there were really 3 things in the Army that made a difference, from the sort of the boy who showed up and the man who left the military. And it was Drill Sergeant Plank, Drill Sergeant Barry, and Drill Sergeant Morales. Those 3 gentlemen I will always remember. In fact, if they walked in here today, it'd probably take me back to that time. But I was an infantryman, and actually spent some time with a great tour. Most recently, we were talking about this on the team, Summer of 1988, my unit was called to fight fires in Yellowstone National Park, if some of you remember that fire. And one of my Army buddies just this morning, actually, sent me a picture he found of the two of us celebrating the snow. And we celebrated the snow because we were not stopping that fire. And it wasn't until a snowfall, an early snowfall, if I remember correctly, in and around Labor Day, that really put an end to that fire, because we were doing our best. But it was pretty tremendous to see and watch, and actually very sad to watch such beautiful country burn. I do remember, though, we would take the low road toward the fire, and the wildlife was taking the low road out of the fire. And we'd have to stand behind trees as herds of deer, for example, would run by us. They were probably thinking, what are you idiots doing? Don't you know there's a fire over there? And they were hauling tail the other way. I came home again after that experience, went to Arizona State for undergrad. My wife came here to the University of Arizona. By the way, she and I have been dating since we were 15 and 16 years old, all the way back to high school. And we then together had the privilege of going to the University of Chicago for graduate school. I got my PhD there, and she got her JD there, her law degree. At the same time that Barack Obama was a faculty member, actually, at Chicago. And so she and her classmates, I remember seeing, not then president, but Barack Obama at the time, smoking behind the law school all the time. And I would go pick up my wife on certain days, and he would be back there with the smokers smoking. I wish I had a better memory, but it's pretty much all I can remember, although buddies tell me that he played basketball in the same places we did there, but I really don't have much of a memory of that. I didn't know he was going to be president, by the way. So it's not as if you're paying attention to him, thinking, you know, this guy could be president someday. I came home to Arizona, and I've worked at the state legislature. I came home with a skill set in statistics and worked at the state legislature in the Senate Education Committee, and then I was the associate superintendent for the state of Arizona. So I've been in an executive position for the state, leading, in this case, really our largest public enterprise in public education as the associate superintendent. But my goal in life was to become a professor. And 12 years ago, I got that privilege, and I have been a professor at Arizona State since, teaching research methods, statistics, education policy classes, mostly to teachers. And so I teach teachers who are most of my students. In fact, I am teaching still today. I'm teaching an online class, which means that on the way up here, Michael, who's part of our team, was driving, and I was in class for a little while, checking in on students. The world has changed with respect to education, really fundamentally. In 2014, I ran for state superintendent of public instruction, and we got this close to winning in 2014. And the good news is we are going to get over the top in 2018. And I ran in 2014 because of a deep commitment to public education. Because I was really sick and tired of watching the legislature cut public schools deeply, criticize them for not improving, and then turning to privatization as a solution. And I knew, given my own research, given my own experiences, that once we allow that to happen, here or anywhere, then the story I just told you of a person who can literally come from being the first in their family to graduate from college to having an opportunity to stand in front of you and run for governor of their home state wouldn't be our story anymore. And that we would have a society of haves and have-nots immediately, because those kinds of market-based approach create haves and have-nots. And so when Doug Ducey signed the voucher bill, now 2 Aprils ago, I knew that my fight for public education was now at the 9th floor, no longer at the superintendent's level, because I didn't have the interest in running for a position to administer a law that I was so, and still am, fundamentally against. And I chose to run for governor for another very important reason. And that is, looking back on 2014, our campaign did some amazing work. I don't know how many of you remember that campaign. But we did some great work. The gubernatorial candidate that year lost by 11 points, and we came within a point of winning. That is making up a lot of ground. But Any ideas why I didn't get over the top? Or maybe Terry Goddard, who also did very well, didn't get over the top? What happened in 2014? Nobody voted. One of the lowest voter turnouts on record. And I knew that going into the next election cycle, the biggest issue we Democrats had to overcome was voter apathy. The biggest issue we needed to work on was voter turnout. And so our campaign is focused very squarely on increasing voter turnout. Because when we increase voter turnout, we win. When we have a voting population that looks like the demographics of Arizona, we win. And so our team has been working extraordinarily hard. We have now up to like 6,000, Sessa, people who have signed up to volunteer with our campaign. We have great teams all over the state, 15 teams, including 4 here in Tucson that are knocking on doors and making personal voter contact. And that personal voter contact is extremely important. And let me tell you why. You may or may not know this, but the Republican Governors Association 2 weeks ago opened up an independent expenditure. Anybody know what that is? It's basically a committee that files to influence the election. And you have to identify who you are, and you have to identify your intent. We know it's the Republican Governors Association, and we know they have put $7.2 million against our campaign. Against our campaign. And I believe, that they know what we've known for a long time, which is, number 1, Doug Ducey is vulnerable, and number 2, we are the campaign that can beat him. And so, with those $7.2 million, what the Republicans are likely going to do is put on the airwaves a barrage of negative ads over and over and over again. And what happens with those negative ads? Do they change people's minds? What do they do?
Turn me off.
They turn you off. Those negative ads do not change people's minds. You know what they do? They sour them to the electoral process. When you start hearing people say, I'm getting sick and tired of that, I can't wait for it to end, that is when every single one of us now needs to step up and get to work. To make sure that the people we're connected to are still connected to the campaign and are going to get out on election day or mail in that ballot. Because those ads suppress the vote. We know it's coming and we're ready to work on it already. That is the reason why our campaign is going to continue to give Arizona not something to vote against. Because I believe a lot of that negativity turns off a lot of voters. But for the first time in a long time, we hope to be a campaign that gives Arizona something they can vote for. Something positive they can vote for. And our hope is that we get out to communities, we get out to populations that feel like they are not part of the electoral process today. Connect with them in a genuine way. Give them something to vote for. And add all of those new votes to this energy that is, I call the Trump bump, by the way, or people running from the present administration or the present conditions. When you add new energy with folks running from and or making votes against, really due to angst given the current situation, add those two together and that's when you get the numbers to win. And we know this, and we think the Republican governors have figured it out too. Another big reason why is because you are looking here at an educator who is running for governor. And the number one issue facing Arizona is public education. Doug Ducey does not want to stand next to an educator who is going to remind him of his failings over and over and over again. Our teachers walked out 50,000 strong, closing schools for multiple days because of the conditions that they're facing in their schools. I am proud to say I have the backing of our teachers through the Arizona Education Association. And education is going to be the central issue in November. And for our educators out there, it's exciting for them. It's exciting because for the first time in a long time, they're going to have a governor who is an educator, who understands what goes on in classrooms, understands education, and is ready to be more committed to public education than any governor we have ever had. We're going to have a very strong commitment to public education. But the number two issue that comes up is healthcare in Arizona. And I believe that healthcare is one that our state has not had a good record on. We have a governor who has, along with Donald Trump, tried to take away people's healthcare. And I believe we need to do the opposite. We need to look at Arizonans and tell them we are committed to affordable, accessible health care for all Arizonans. And that is very important for rural Arizona, for example, and I think is a right and not a privilege, and we will work very hard on that. But the dog whistle issue, the one the Republicans want to talk about the most, and you'll hear about the most, is immigration. It's the issue that they trot out, and they've done it in races across the country, because it ignites fear in people, because it divides communities. And from my perspective, this is one we have got to blow through. We have got to get through this one, because the truth is, immigration has always been central to our history. It's always been central to who we are as a country. And in my opinion, our American values are built around an immigration system that does three things. Number one is security. Number two is lawful entry for those ready to contribute to the United States. And number three, to be a place of refuge for those most in need. In my opinion, that's who we are. Those are the values that I serve to protect. And when asked, we're going to remind everybody that of the two potential candidates for governor, that this time around the Democrats are running the patriot. They're running the guy that's already defended our borders and is ready to continue to do so. But that does not mean that we need to turn away those who may not look like us. And in my opinion, we need to continue to invite people to enrich and enhance and contribute to this country who are ready to do so. We as a country have attracted so much talent through that immigration process, and I believe we need to continue to do it. Lastly, as I mentioned in my opening, we're winning. We continue to remain ahead in the Democratic primary. A poll done recently by ABC has our campaign up by 15 points, and we are excited about that. We're not taking it lightly, and we're working very hard to make sure come Tuesday we are the campaign standing there. However, the most exciting part is on more than one occasion, our team has pulled ahead of Doug Ducey as well. And we're the only campaign to do that. And so, as people come up to me and say, David, thank you for running, I have to remind them that I'm not in this thing to run, I'm in this thing to win. Because more than anything, we need to win, so that we can focus on public education, so that we can change the narrative around immigration, and so that we can focus on health care for all Arizonans. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions. And do I need to pass the mic, Tom, to do that?
I don't think so.
Okay, great. Questions? Got one written down. My position on Roe v. Wade and LGBTQ issues, is that correct? So number one, Roe v. Wade, I am endorsed by Planned Parenthood. And I'm proud to have that endorsement. And we, particularly given what's happening with the Supreme Court nomination, I believe governors need to be that final stop to make sure that any legislation that comes across my desk that will erode a woman's right to choose, we will veto. And I want to make sure that that is clear. That is going to be our focus. With respect to LGBTQ issues, I'm in favor of a non-discrimination executive order. However, beyond that, I believe that we need to have inclusion with respect to who is at the table in terms of developing policy going forward. This is beyond LGBTQ issues, but to populations in Arizona right now that aren't in a position to have their voices heard. I look forward to developing a cabinet and leadership positions that do, and making sure we are clear and careful to close any discrimination on behalf of our LGBTQ community with respect to employment, for example, and housing and other public services and civil rights issues. Answer your question? Yes?
You mentioned education and the voucher program. Can you expand a little bit on how you would how you would get money to improve the education?
Yeah, money to improve education. There are three things we need to do. Number one, I am in favor of the Invest in Ed Act that our teachers are pushing. We've been behind the Red for Ed Act and now Invest in Ed as a team from the very beginning. And so I believe that that is a needed revenue source. One, because it balances our tax structure in Arizona, but in addition, it's a dedicated revenue source. That's important. As crazy as it sounds, teachers, when they went up to the legislature, realized they didn't have a lot of trust in their legislative elected officials and needed a revenue source that bypassed the legislature and went straight to the classroom. Otherwise, teachers would put a lot of effort into putting something on the ballot only to have the legislature pick away at it over time. Number two, we need to close many tax credits in Arizona, particularly our universal voucher program. And that is money going to private schools. And I think that is important because there's nothing against private schools, but my job when I raise my right hand to uphold and defend the Constitution of Arizona is to create amazing public schools. And I don't think we are taking that seriously as long as we're letting hundreds of millions of dollars exit the public school system for private schools. Number three is there are corporate loopholes up to $13.7 billion. I'm certain you've heard this before, that we need to look at and make sure that they remain good public policy for Arizona. However, those loopholes get there because of cozy relationships between legislators and lobbyists. And those cozy relationships happen on the campaign trail. When lobbyists show up with dollars to help our elected officials get elected. So, in order to maintain my promise to not only serve the people of Arizona, but to not be beholden to those interests, our campaign is taking zero lobbyist dollars. And that way, our campaign is taking zero lobbyist dollars. Now, we are almost up to 20,000 contributions. And 20 people snuck in who were lobbyists. We didn't know they were. In fact, some of them didn't even know they were registered lobbyists. And we have returned, or will return, all of those dollars to keep that promise. Because here, I used to work at the legislature. And, you all go back to your lives after today. Hopefully we come back as governor and meet you again. But those lobbyists, they stick around. And they stay there waiting for access. And so my vision, and who knows, maybe one of these days you can join me. We'll come down the elevator from the 9th floor, and around you'll see these dark suits milling around, waiting to connect with elected officials. Most of them are lobbyists. We're going to walk right past every single one of them. We're not going to owe them a thing, and we're going to come back out and serve the people of Arizona. So, yes, ma'am.
What do you think of the business of building a wall between us?
What do I think of the business of putting a wall? I stand firmly against the wall. Absolutely firmly against the wall. And the reason is it doesn't make us any more secure. It is a waste of money, and it will be a scar on us as a state, us as a nation going forward. Walls have been put up in many examples before, many times before, only to be taken down. And I believe that that is the fate of a wall if it ever comes to fruition. And there are a few issues, to be honest with you, that I want to look at, and I want to look at my daughters and have them know that we were on the right side of history on this one, and being against the wall is one of them. Another one is being in favor of our dreamers, by the way. I want my daughters to know that their papa did everything he could to make sure our dreamers could continue to study, contribute to the only country that they know. From my perspective, arguments have been made through history about denying education opportunities to different people. It was at one time women, the poor, African Americans, for example. And never have those arguments been sound reasons. That's the same argument that are being made today. And I think that over time and over history, that we're in a circumstance right now where the right side of history is going to allow young people, who I believe were as American as I am, to continue to contribute to the only state and country that they know. Thank you. Yes?
I'd like to know your thoughts on the justice system, especially on prison reform.
Yes.
I think too many people are being incarcerated. I
Yes.
have a concern inmates are not getting proper health care. I'm strongly opposed to capital punishment. I don't know what your feeling is on that, but do you have any thoughts on how this incarceration system is working in Arizona?
Yes, well, we are to the point now where I think we have the sixth highest incarceration rate. 48% of our prisoners are there for nonviolent offenses. I believe that is not only a waste of resources, it's a waste of human lives as well. What we're going to do is we're going to look to reduce corrections expenses every single year to the point where we put private prisons in Arizona out of business. That is going to be the goal. But here's the thing, folks. There are people working on these issues, but they're not tied to policy today. And when we say we are going to reduce corrections and put money into education and education programming around reducing recidivism, focusing on prevention, criminal justice reform, closing the school-to-prison pipeline. When we support programs that focus in those areas, we make better decisions with respect to how we're deciding to imprison folks in Arizona. But in addition, we both either keep people from going to prison who should be there, and or making to the best we can, making sure those who exit have an opportunity to transition back to life out, civilian life, as opposed to returning back again. So we're going to focus on those areas and tie them into a conversation that is going to help us be a state that is no longer one of the top states with respect to incarceration rates.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have a position on water?
Do you have a position on water issues? Yes. You know, of the various issues that come my way, the one that probably strikes the most fear in me is water. And it is because it is a finite resource. We are living in a desert, and so little is being done right now to have a discussion and to conserve water in the way that we should. In addition, I don't know if you know this, but what's happening now is not all, well, actually very recently, not because of Doug Ducey, but because of folks at the federal level, have pulled together, finally, all of the interests, and there are about 40 different interests that need to be at the table to develop water policy going forward. We are going to take a lead in that discussion, because we as Arizonans, for the sustainability of our state, need to be in a leadership position with respect to water. We also are going to make, we have with the drought contingency plan coming, some decisions to make with respect to restrictions. And my philosophy, and it's the same philosophy that I have since I was a 17-year-old infantryman, and that is everybody has to do their part. Our infantry units, our military is built on that same premise. You are not going to make it home unless everybody does their part. And I believe we need to take that same philosophy in water. And so you're going to see me take a leadership position right out of the gate come January, so that we can begin our work on the drought contingency plan and begin talking and putting into action ways that we can continue, so that we can conserve water in Arizona. We can make some better decisions without question. Others? Yes, sir.
What's your position on a dedicated property tax for education?
What is my position on a dedicated property tax for education? I am, first and foremost, focusing on the Invest in Ed initiative, which is an income tax. You know, there are three different ways to do this, with three general ways: income tax, sales tax, and property tax. And the immediate focus right now is on an income tax for our wealthiest Arizonans, top 1%. And I think folks have heard, well, you know, it's class warfare, but about a month ago in the Arizona Republic, I read an article looking at CEO salaries in Arizona. And in 1 year, CEOs have gotten a 47% raise on average. 47%. The rest of Arizona, 4%. And so in my opinion, this is a circumstance where rather than putting more money on sales tax, which Arizona has a high sales tax already, the other two options are property tax and income tax. And I believe that focusing on an income tax makes better sense for Arizona going forward. Now, there's a lot of discussion, particularly among the superintendent candidates, about the role of property taxes in local school funding. And I don't know if you know this, but it's almost split equally with respect to the amount of money coming from the state to school districts and the amount of dollars that they receive in local property taxes. And even though state dollars are equal, property taxes are generally inequitable. Rich districts can generate more than poor districts, for example. And I believe that, particularly among the superintendent candidates, there's going to be a vigorous debate about the extent to which that funding structure can and should continue in Arizona, whether it makes the most sense, and whether it is creating inequities across school districts that we need to address. Others?
Thank you.
All right. Anything else? That's going to make this easy on me here, I
So
think.
what are the things that you think are most important that you would like to achieve?
What are the things that I think are most important that I want to achieve?
Yeah.
Education, education, education. This is an issue about education. And it is preschool all the way up to the universities that we're going to focus on. Look, if you look at other states and the economic development of other states, the number one issue holding Arizona back is a lack of commitment to education. Education, folks, is an investment in human capital, in the ideas and the knowledge and experiments and research that are driving our economy today. I mean, if you look at, I just took a picture. If you look at how more and more is being driven with respect to technology, there are ideas that entrepreneurs and young people are already thinking about that we don't even know we need yet, and they're developing them. We need that spirit here in Arizona so that Arizona becomes the place where if you have an idea and a dollar, you can make it happen here. And it's a few things. It is preschool education, which is the best investment we can make. It is a high-quality K through 12 experience. And by the way, we're going to start pulling back our obsession with standardized testing and focus on the real-world outcomes that get students ready for life after high school. I'm in favor of investing in community colleges and eventually getting to a universal community college system in Arizona for a couple reasons. Number one, focusing on the community colleges helps keep expenses down, as most young people start their higher education journey at the community college before and if they move on to the university. But in addition, community colleges are also that can work on a strata of high-tech jobs and will help build economies. This is using the community colleges to develop training in solar maintenance and installation, for example, aerospace, robotics, healthcare. Community colleges are a place where we can invest in those types of high-tech jobs in manufacturing. And then last, anybody know our constitutional obligation for public universities in Arizona? What does it read in our Constitution? Public universities should be as nearly free as possible. How crazy progressive is that for Arizona? And I believe that phrase is in there. Less about the finances and more about the opportunities that low-cost higher education can provide, so that it provides access to young people across Arizona. But also so that when you leave, you're ready to participate in the economy. You're ready to buy a house, start a business, and you are not saddled with student debt that keeps you from participating right away. We are a campaign that is going to be unabashedly forward-looking and ready to take Arizona into the future. You're going to hear Doug Ducey's campaign built around the word security. Secure Arizona. It's a fearful way of looking at our state. And on our side, we're going to talk about building Arizona. We're going to talk about building, as I said in my introduction, building the state and the communities that build me and continue to build Arizona going forward. Oh, there you go. We got another idea. Yes?
Do you have any thoughts on those people who are graduating from college and starting out with this enormous debt?
Yeah, so for those starting and graduating, one of the things, I'll back that out into a larger focus on my approach toward economic development. One of the things in Arizona that we have done is we are, like many other places, fighting with corporations to bring them to Arizona. And you fight by cutting your bottom line over and over again. It becomes really, at the end of the day, a fight over who is provide the best tax deal to corporations coming in. And it means we have corporations in Arizona that are here and are not paying back, at least for some period of time, into the infrastructure of our state. And we're going to continue to look to bring corporations that are ready to invest in Arizona here. But I also like to make a shift, and this goes to those young folks who are leaving college today, to an emphasis on businesses starting, building, and staying in Arizona. Because if you look at how, particularly the western United States is being built right now, areas that are growing and prospering are built with ideas that are manufactured there, that start there. This is how Silicon Valley was developed, for example, Seattle. Denver's doing good work in this area, and I'd love to see Arizona and Phoenix and Tucson be a place where if you are a recent grad and you have an idea, you're going to get investment and assistance from the state so that you can grow your idea. Keep it here in Tucson, for example, build, scale up in Tucson, and continue to contribute back. And for a lot of young folks, that's an exciting thing to hear. It's a vote of confidence in them, their ideas, and what they can get done to build Arizona moving forward. Yes, sir.
Is there anything in the legislature or anything you can promise about easing the expenses of old people, seniors like us?
Yeah, easing the expenses. You know, the legislature, in my time there, I wouldn't say in every case, but I think the legislature in many cases, as they look at the impact of financial decisions, has taken into consideration folks on fixed incomes, for example. There have been some changes in property tax laws, for example. And it is something that I am in favor of continuing to do so that we understand the impact on multiple communities in Arizona as we make financial decisions. So from my experience and my time at the legislature, there were folks who stopped and asked, okay, we're moving forward with something, how does it impact? And a few of those communities, one of them, for example, that comes up often is our reservation, our Native American communities. How does this impact Native American communities, and do we need to think about writing it differently and or putting something in place? School construction, for example, I remember being part of that conversation years ago. And if you are a rural, isolated school district, your expenses are going to be different, probably higher than Central Phoenix. Likewise, I remember many conversations around the impact on communities and people who are on fixed incomes as well. And I believe those are the right thing to do to make sure we're not putting in place any unintended outcomes, and I look forward to continuing that conversation and that focus. Yes, ma'am.
Say some more about the Native Americans.
Say some more about Native Americans. So I am from Arizona, born and raised. I recognize that our Native Americans have made contributions to Arizona now for decades. And I am going to focus on some areas that I believe are very important for our Native American communities. First and foremost is sovereignty. Recognizing our Native community, our Native nations as sovereign nations, and understanding it is a peer-to-peer relationship and discussion. Second is to continue to support efforts for self-determination so that Native American communities can and continue to support themselves, whether it's through education, whether it's through investment, and focusing on those areas. And third is access. So that as governor, you are getting face-to-face with communities, and particularly Native American communities, because in my opinion, there's almost this out-of-sight, out-of-mind idea. You go up to like the Navajo Nation, it's so far away that I believe that folks there believe that they're not part of the conversation. When I was associate superintendent, we made a promise and a commitment to our communities across Arizona, and that is if you gathered people, we will come out to you. And I did that because I felt it was the right thing to do. It was respectful. I lived in Central Phoenix. I could get to a meeting in 10 minutes. And yet we had people that had to drive 3 hours to participate in the policies that impact their lives. And we made a commitment that if you gather people, we're going to get out to you in enough time to be part of the conversation. And we're going to continue that commitment as governor and in my administration. And so that kind of access is important. I think lastly, my daughters enjoy going to celebrations and learning about other cultures. Their single most, I think the most fun they've had so far was the Navajo Nation Parade last September, and they're on board to go back and do it again because it was such an experience for them to learn about hairstyles and about dress and about jewelry and to have conversations about food. And to the extent I can promote that as a father and having my daughters learning different cultures and understanding how people in Arizona, different people live in different ways, I think we're doing them a real favor. Yes?
Yeah, I'd like to get back to this question about recent graduates coming out of
Sure.
school with a great deal of debt.
Sure.
I understand what you're saying about if they can come out with a good idea and do a startup and et cetera, but lots of students don't have that. And they come out with lots of debts. So, I'm thinking about medical students, for example. And so it takes them endless number of years to pay back their student debts. Do you have any ideas on things like loan forgiveness?
Yes, so
or if
there
they stay in
Arizona,
if they stay in Arizona, for example, maybe that could, and put whatever they learn to use in Arizona in their own communities, maybe that could be a contribution to pay down of their debt, or some ideas about how to get rid of all this debt.
there have long been, it's a good point, there have long been opportunities for graduates to give back and pay back through service. Teachers, for example, social workers, those in the medical profession. And they have been programs in Arizona. In other words, they've been kind of fits and starts. We have one that gets going for a little while and then goes away. We have another one, and I think there's still one, I was just looking at it recently, for teachers that I believe is being phased out. I believe that those are win-win arrangements. They help out students who are graduates who are facing debt, but they also provide needed resources for communities. And so I have not seen, over the recent history, a large-scale discussion about returning to a philosophy around service and around paying back. Although, as I mentioned, there are win-win situations, so I would be very much in favor of getting on board and providing and having available to help out local communities and to help out graduates as well.
So you would advocate for that if you were governor?
We would, so yes, we would certainly advocate for it. Without question, I would. I don't know where the legislature is on pushing some of these ideas or where these programs are. Some of them may be in law and just need funding. Others may need to be reconstituted. But it's just something that I would certainly be in favor of looking into and supporting. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
You probably know, back in I think it was the 16th century, the Dutch used that. What you're saying now. They got their free education, but then they had to go to the Dutch colonies and work at whatever their degree was in for X years. Then they could come back. And it was a good thing because they learned more being, in the colonies. So that's a very good idea that has been used before and really works.
Well, as I mentioned, it is a win-win arrangement, both for the graduate and for the communities they serve, particularly when you match those skills to areas and communities in need, whether it's a geographic area or a specialty area in need, without question. I think it also helps to make sure we have educated folks who are in these positions. Sometimes, and I will speak just for education, we don't have enough folks who have the proper training or certification to be in positions, and I think that it will help in those circumstances as well. So I believe those are win-win situations without question, absolutely. Yes?
I just have great faith in our millennials.
Great faith in millennials.
Yeah, they are energized.
Sure.
And they have gone through a lot in our society in just the last 2 or 3 years. And I think whether how they're going to vote, but I think they're out there and I think they're talking to others.
I share that faith. I share that faith in them. I'm a professor. And so millennials are walking into my classrooms and working with me on a consistent basis. And I've been impressed with the commitment and the ideas that I have seen over and over and over again. And this idea of building Arizona and investing in the ideas we're talking about ultimately, as I said, is a futuristic look and an investment in the generation and generations that I think are not only going to shape Arizona today, but are going to make a difference for years to come. Maybe I'll leave you with this. I'm an educator. Oh, do you want to ask a
I was
question?
just wondering if you were familiar with the school in Mesa. It's public education that combines the educational part plus the technical training, so that when
It's called EVIT, yes.
Yeah.
So there is, to go back to the idea of education for just a second, I am looking forward to creating the flexibility for our traditional public schools to put out some exciting, innovative programs. And there's a number of them. My daughters, for example, attended a Montessori school in the Phoenix Elementary School District. And it is a very good Montessori school in a public school. And it is an innovative idea. And it may not be for every parent, but for those interested in their children having a Montessori education, it's a fantastic place. Downtown Phoenix, there's a brand new school. It's a coding academy, computer coding. It's about 400 students. It's for students to high school who are going to graduate with a diploma, but also walk away with skills in coding as well. It's another fantastic idea. What's happening right now, though, is there's such an emphasis on standardized testing that it encourages schools to be more alike than dissimilar. It stifles innovation. And when we change those policies and encourage our schools to go out and come up with ideas that are going to be innovative, we not only create graduates ready to take on exciting issues and do exciting things, we change teaching and learning as well, so that the classroom becomes a place that is more welcoming for students. And I think that's going to be a huge change in Arizona, and I look forward to being part of that. And I think it goes back to my point as an educator as well. Look, I said I was running to be governor of my home state. And here's my big vision. We're going to win this thing twice. We're going to win in 18, we're going to come back and win this again. And my goal is to leave behind the generation of leaders that are going to continue to lead this state for years to come. That's what educators do. What educators do is you work with students who go off and do things that are better than you would have ever imagined. And you take your pride in being part of their success and their development. We're going to take that same approach, creating new leaders in Arizona, bringing in new voices in Arizona. And my wife and I, both of us from here, our goal is to, in 15, 20 years from now, go out to dinner and have people come up to us who are doing amazing things, continuing to lead this state in a positive direction. And to tell us that we had maybe just a little bit to do with their success and giving them an opportunity. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. Do we got one more?
Yeah, are you going to vote for the ERA?
Yeah, yes, we are going to vote for the ERA. Yes, it's a good question. In fact, I learned that when it gets to my desk, depending on the timing, Arizona could be the 38th state, which means we could be the state to ratify it, which would be very exciting. Yeah, that would be amazing. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you for coming out. It was wonderful to meet you, and I appreciate the opportunity to introduce myself. Thank you.